What is happening, Flip Flop fam? I am super excited to have Staci here. I was on her show, I guess a month ago or so now. But for people who don't know Staci, who are you and what do you do?
I help people build businesses they own that don't own them by putting people and playbooks in place and leading and managing, holding accountable those people to those playbooks so they can get shit done while staying rooted.
Amazing. This is no wonder we get along, right? That's the same thing I do all day with people. What
Yeah.
is your like I work with custom home builders primarily and a lot of coaches too, but what's your niche? Kind of where's your flow? I know you got a background in real estate.
Yeah, my niche for a while was real estate, and it's starting to expand because what I had noticed is that a lot of people who end up trapped in their businesses, on the verge of losing their sanity, drowning in operational chaos, wondering why they started the business, they're really hitting a pain line or a wall of trauma. And we have to learn how to heal so we can hustle. And so I'm starting to expand and work with people. I just did a client in the mental health space, and they actually serve military bases who are struggling with PTSD. We have another client in the financial world. So it's really folks who have hit their wall of trauma or their pain line in their business, and they have hit that enough is enough. I can't keep operating like this. I want to do something different. And whether it's usually the seven-figure mark. So they hit the seven-figure mark and they feel like I can't keep doing this. I want to do it differently. And they're searching. So they're searching for, well, do I need to hire an integrator? Do I need to put systems in place? Do I need to change as a leader? And there's that saying that you don't have the business you want because you haven't become the leader to run it. And when somebody has that level of awareness, they're ready for the transformation that I help them through.
Yeah, I love that. You know, in our world, it's guys that are usually around that 2 to 3 million mark, and that's when, based on the team they've built, and almost all their teams look exactly the same when they come to us. They're working 60 hours a week, and the thing I hear more often than not is, "I just can't do this anymore," and
Yeah.
they don't know what to do, and a lot of them they end up shutting it down, or they have a heart attack, or they get divorced, or I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of really bad consequences. So when somebody
Yeah.
comes to you in that state, you know, kind of what's the journey you take them through? What's the first questions you ask them? Tell me more about that.
Well, the model is the three-step model. So step one, and you'll appreciate this being in real estate, is architect. So a lot of times when people start businesses, they're excited, especially that seven-figure mark, whether it's multi seven figure or just hitting that seven-figure mark. They're founders. It's the founder dilemma, and they like it because they're the technician of it. They like the art of it. In that transition from loving the art of it to actually operationalizing it and turning it into a business is different, as you know. And so we sit down and we architect first. Like, what is this business supposed to do, and what do you want it to do for you? Because when they end up trapped in the business, they were really disconnected from themselves,
Mhm.
and they don't even know what they want anymore. It's like, who are you? What do you want? And they're like, I don't know. And in order to get that back, they need space because there's so many tabs in their brain that are open around the business. And to your point, like their spouse is mad at them because they're working so much and they're maybe around the dinner table, but they're not there. Their spouse is like, "Are you even hearing anything I'm saying?" And they're like, just the tabs in the brain. And so getting them out of it, creating some space so they could really connect with themselves again, say, what do you want the business to do for you personally? And then what do you want the business to do in general? And architecting that blueprint. And then we have to build the infrastructure. So lay the foundation for that type of operation. We have to construct it. We have to uh, figure out the flow, all of that, and build it. And then the third phase is operate. And that's where you would plug a property manager in or a tenant in to run the day to day. There are three very distinct personalities, and you know this from custom home building. The architect who envisions something out of nothing is not the person who's going to enjoy being the property manager or tenant. It's different parts of their brain. And what happens is as a founder, they try to do all three, Or they try to hire people who are operational and ask them to architect, or hire people who are architect and ask them to operate. And it's just a mess. And they have to unravel it, get clarity around what the company needs and what they need personally, and then go to work on making that transition. And the transition is the hard part because there's a great book called Managing Transitions, and it talks about how there's the logistical change and then there's the emotional change. And we all know if you're not growing, you're dying, and change is a requirement to expansion and growth. However, the emotional change requires grief. We have to grieve the way things were in order to create space for something new. And when you're in that pain line in that chaotic state, it's like you're clinging. People are clinging to, I can't operate like this, but I want to cling to some sense of control. And so the journey of giving them the space so they can like stop white knuckling it and then give them a new vision of the future so that they can have hope for something better than it is, so that they can let go of what is to create space for the newness is a psychological journey, it's a structural journey, and it's a social journey because the team has to have buy-in too. And so we help people through that all three phases and all three aspects of it.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Like the thing I want to talk about first, and obviously I talk about it in my book a lot, where you go through the waves method and you're talking about your why and your statement of purpose in particular, and it's something I work on. My guys are typically, they're not mostly in like kind of that woo woo realm, right? And you really have to get them to adopt the fact that all business problems are human being problems. And
Yes.
you're the human being at the top. And I'll give you an example. The guys that have trouble getting out of the field is because they feel guilty that they're not on site doing the work. And it's like, well, you're the only one that can put deals together. You're the only one that can go meet with the bankers. You're the only one that can estimate these jobs, correctly. And we need to get you in that CEO role. So you're so right on with, we constantly do that future visioning. What do you want your life to look like in a year? You
Yeah,
know?
I think what you just hit on too, I love what you said is all business problems are human being problems, and businesses are just really communities, and they're assemblies of people. And what happens when you start making these transitions is, as a CEO founder, their identity is attached to the business. So to your like being in the field, I don't want to not be in the field because that's who I am. And if I'm not that, who am I? And so the transition creates an identity crisis. And that is the part that most people don't make the leap because they're clinging to the identity of who they are as an operator versus who they need to become. And it's their sense of significance, their sense of validation, their sense of value has been so closely tied to their productivity within the business that they don't see themselves as useful if they're not productive in that fashion, even though their productivity in a different container is more needed for the growth and sustainability of the company. They are struggling psychologically to make that shift because it feels like they're not worthy, like there's no worth or value to them unless they do those things, and it's such a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you about this. What percentage, I guess, of people come to you and they don't necessarily need or want to scale. They just want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur. And you have to break the news to them that that means they might only do $800,000 a year. And they have to be okay with that, right? Because we're taught, certainly in Western world, that go bigger, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger to your own demise. How many people do you have to throttle back versus, all right, I'm going to bring in 20 people underneath me so that I can take this thing to 10 million?
Yeah, I think that what you're speaking to is clarity. I don't know the percentage. I agree with you that we get stuck in the bigger, better, more. And when they get the clarity around what they really want, then that is the answer. So if they want to scale just for scaling's sake, which most of them realize that that's not really what they want, and then you're looking at like, okay, well maybe let's operationalize it and let's construct an exit. because you can have an exit and then you can invest in assets and you can have cash flow and you can create this lifestyle. And maybe you enjoy starting businesses. And so maybe you're an idea addict and what you want, yeah, exactly. What you really want to do is you want to go to 0 to 7 and exit. Okay, well then let's create a system where you go 0 to 7 and exit because that is actually what you really enjoy. The whole scaling it means that you're not needed in the business. And then that is a transition most people don't want.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And for those of you listening, I raised my hand to the guy who likes to start had
Yeah, I mean,
13
I love
businesses
it
at this point.
too.
Um, Let me ask you this because it's the constraint I see come up most often. It's usually pretty early on in the process. Obviously, builder's time machine, right? Like we focus on time. Time is everything we do around here. And why do we focus on time? Because when we get your time back, every other metric goes up. Your happiness goes up, your health goes up, your relationships go up, your profits go up, everything goes up.
Yeah.
But it's counterintuitive for people. And typically, even people that are doing 1, 2, 3 million, there's no money there to hire who they need to hire. And how do you instill in those folks that if we can get you back to your wheelhouse, you will make 10x what that person costs? Just you have to take that leap. How do you get them over that hump?
Oh, I say this to them often, which is, I know you're going to do whatever it takes to make this business what it needs to be, right? And they're like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm like, okay, whatever it takes looks very different than what you think whatever it takes looks like. And are you ready for that conversation? And then they're like, oh no, because then they know it's coming, that it's like, you don't get to work 24/7 in this become what you want it to be. And then we do the delegate and transcend. So, what is everything that you do and what brings you the most joy? And then, whatever brings them the most joy is what they keep. And then, everything else gets off of their plate. And then it actually gets done better. In a weird way, it gets done better, more efficiently, profit margin increases, and their joy factor increases, which means they become better at the seat that they're in, which means that the culture changes. And when the culture changes, productivity increases, efficiency increases, operations are streamlined, and they end up having the business that they want. And they had just become the leader to run it.
Yeah. Yeah. The example I use a lot is, typically an admin is what my guys need. And they find themselves now they're a glorified errand boy and they're an office admin. Like that's what the CEO looks like for them. And I always say that you will make back just in mistakes that didn't happen that salary because you
Yeah,
have the time to focus and bid things correctly and be on job sites and do actual quality control, not just fly in, fly out, go to the next one.
yeah.
So I totally hear what you're saying. How can people find you? I like to put this in the middle so it's not at the end when everybody
Yeah.
closed the car
Well,
door and walked into the coffee shop.
if they send an email to scale@organized2scale.com, they can get access to a bunch of free resources, shows how we architect, build, and operate businesses, and access there. I'm also Staci Gray all over social media. So you can just STACIGRAY and connect with me there.
Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you a little bit about your background, and then we're going to go into the question. I don't know if I told you about this, like where the last
Oh,
guest left
I
you a
don't know.
question. All right. So stole it from Stephen G, but
Mm.
the last guest left you a question. You get to leave the next guest a question, and we'll get to
Mm.
that. And it's Stacy, it's crazy like how apropos the questions are for the next guest, even though I have no idea who's going to be on. It's wild, and you're going to love yours. So, give me more of your background. Like, how did you get into this? What led to, most people built these things for themselves, right? And then that's when they start to offer it to other people.
Well, my story actually started when I graduated high school. So my father is a pretty successful entrepreneur. He was co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show for many, many years. He just recently stepped down as co-host, but for over 20 years was co-host. And when I graduated high school at 16, he didn't want me to go to college. He said, come work with me in the real estate business. And if at 18 you want to go to college, you can. But I don't want you going now. So I started answering the phones. They had a mortgage company, they did real estate events and seminars. We had a membership program. We just had all sorts of things that help real estate investors invest. I started answering the phones, and maybe within 6 months, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done answering phones. And he said, that's fine. You just have to hire and train your replacement. And he handed me a copy of E-Myth by Michael Gerber and said, read this. And so I read that book and I created like a registration coordinator handbook with standard operating procedures and how to do the role that I was in. And then I hired and trained my replacement. And then I quickly realized, oh, shoot, I have to manage this person. I don't know how to manage. I'm not a leader. I'm 16 years old. So I started reading John Maxwell and Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and all the management books that were out there at the time and started developing my skills as a leader and a manager. And eventually I became president of the real estate guys and all of our family businesses and ran those for several years. And then I went off and built some of my own companies. And then my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in 2015. And my father called me and said, hey, will you come run all the family businesses because I really want to have time with your mother? And I said, sure. But at this point, I had discovered EOS, traction, scaling up, some of the more advanced operational systems. And I said, I want time with my mom too. So I will come in and I'll run the businesses, but I'm going to run them so differently. And I implemented EOS and traction and scoreboards and or scorecards and measure what matters and all of these KPI structures. And I hired and trained a team. And the business doubled, our profit margin increased. I spent the last 18 months of my mom's life with her. She passed in 2019. And because all of the clients of our family businesses were real estate investors and entrepreneurs, they started asking me to do for them what they had just watched me do for our family businesses. And so I was like, I don't know if this is scalable. Like, I don't know if I can come in and operationalize all of these businesses, but I had a few friendlies and I said, let me see if I can do it. And so I started working with people one-on-one, and it turns out you can. And so I ended up doing 36 businesses in 36 months that raised over 300 million for different investment projects. There was a whole plot twist in that whole thing that really turned the lights on for me, that made the aha about who I had to become as a leader. And that started a whole inner warrior journey, as I think you call it, or peaceful warrior
Yeah,
journey, as
peaceful
you
warrior.
call it. And that then became more of my passion, like who you have to become to run the company that you want. And so Organized to Scale really was birthed from us solving our own problems internally as a family unit. And then I did it for a bunch of people one-on-one. And then I started doing it for people in group settings. And it really helped them scale. I had people go from 0 to 5 million in just a very short amount of time. And it was that moment when you feel like I can help people not just build businesses and do the bigger, better, more, but I can actually change their dinner tables. And that was what I was more passionate about, was restoring dinner tables, because so many entrepreneurs end up sacrificing their dinner tables to scale their companies. And then they wake up in their quote unquote dream life, and it's not what they thought it was going to be, because their relationships are suffering, their health is suffering, their kids are upset with them, or they don't even have quality relationships anymore. And they say it wasn't worth it. I have the money, I have the cars, I have the things, but it's not, I sold my soul in the process. And so the second wave or the third wave, I don't know how many iterations we're on now, but it was much more about integration. It was about, visionary and integrator and EOS. And I liked most of the businesses I've built as integrator. And Organized to Scale was the first one that I was building as visionary. And I realized in that journey that a visionary is just an integrator of the ethereal. Like, it's integrating something that's unknown that you're getting channeled or downloaded or connected to. And then your job is to integrate that into the physical world. And I learned through my own journey of becoming the visionary of how critical it is that I stay tapped in to my faith along that journey and spirituality along that journey so that I was building from a place of integrity and authenticity versus self-guided or self-led or self-indulgence, which I think a lot of us can do. And I think when we build from a place of self-indulgence, that's bigger, better, more, which leads to waking up in your dream life and not feeling like you thought it would, versus when you build from integrity and you don't sacrifice your morals, your values, your standards, your priorities in the building phase, you actually are able to still build, but also have it be congruent and wake up in your dream life and it feel like you thought it would.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more with damn near all of that. I think it was
Mhm.
our second, we're almost at 100 episodes of this show. And I think it was the second episode I had Michael Vincent on, who was a brilliant magician and photographer in London. And he actually did my headshots in London while just by chance while
Oh,
we were there. But our whole episode was titled Right Map, Wrong Mountain. And we're handed this map by society. It was the same keynote I gave or commencement address I gave back in June up in New York. And it's, society or your parents or your partner gives you this map and you're like, all right, I'm gonna get to the top. And you get to the top and you realize it was never yours.
yes, yes, yes. And I want to add to this because it doesn't mean that climbing that mountain was for naught. Because what you gain on the climb is the skills. So
100%.
it was the skill mountain that you climbed, and you needed those skills. And so then when you get to go climb your mountain, you have a collection of skills and tools and resources and relationships and connections that allow you to climb your mountain more aligned.
Yeah. You either learn or you win, right?
Yes.
There's no failure.
Yes.
I love what you said, restoring dinner tables. I mean, boy, does that resonate. Boy, does that resonate. Um, so I'm going to ask you the question that was left by our last guest, who is a mindset coach, as it turns out. His name's Albi Sabani. But first, what question do you want to leave for the next guest? Be
Who do
anything you
you,
want.
okay, I got it. Who do you need to become to have the business and life you want?
I love it. All right. So, the question left for you was, when is the last time you sat with yourself?
Hmm. Well, short answer is this morning. I do it all the time. But there was a season in my life, 6 months, where I sat with myself for a whole 6 months. And if anyone can sit with themselves for even a day, no screens, no nothing, be out with yourself in nature for a whole day, it will change you.
I agree. I agree. I don't know who said the quote, you might know it, but it was, most of man's problems stem from his inability to sit quietly in a room alone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So true. And tying it all back into what we've been talking about, the free space. Sometimes as a CEO, it's just time to think, so that you just have a couple hours a day to think.
Well, let me say this. Your job as a CEO is to think. That is your job. If you're not sitting with yourself and thinking, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, 1,000% agree. 1,000% agree. Is there anything else you've left out that you want the audience to know about you or your system or the world or mindfulness, whatever you want?
Mhm. Um, I love that you called out restoring dinner tables because that is actually my biggest passion. It was why I even came and supported my father in our family businesses was to restore our dinner table when my mother was going through cancer. And I'm passionate about it in so many different ways. And so my leaving comment would be don't sacrifice your dinner table to preserve your dinner table. Because here's what happens people say, I am doing this for my family. I'm making all this money for my family. I am doing this for them. And they're sacrificing the very thing they're doing it for.
Yeah.
And so don't sacrifice it while you're doing it, saying it's a priority. Keep it a priority along the entire journey.
Amazing what we can justify as business people, right?
Yes, yes.
Staci, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I know the audience certainly got a ton of value. If you didn't find something to think about in the last 30 minutes, what is wrong with you? So, anyway, I just want to thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I hope this blesses your audience.
All right, Flip Flop fam, you can check out Staci. All of her links and everything are in the show notes. And until next time, we will see you on the flip side. Cheers.